Hello YouTubers, welcome to Big Buddha is Watching. I'm Big Buddha and welcome to a rare book review, novel review. Now I thought I'd take a look today at Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Quentin Tarantino's new novel. There was no sort of hype for this thing leading up to it. Nobody knew that he had a book in the offing. He started writing this thing just as a way of keeping himself amused during lockdown. I think Tarantino has had many writing projects bubbling away, film analysis books. I know The Hateful Eight started out as a novel. It started out as a novel spin-off of Django Unchained. He then later rewrote the initial idea for that novel as The Hateful Eight and took Django out of it, claiming that the story worked better when you didn't have a moral centre, in the form of Django in that case. But it sounds to me, from the interviews that I've heard recently with Tarantino, that he just did this as a way of keeping himself amused during lockdown. As well as this, he had a few other writing projects on the go, all expanded from the universe he created in the film. Apparently, I don't know if this is true, but apparently there's talk of a follow-up novel to this novelisation being published, all about the films of Rick Dalton, Leonardo DiCaprio's character from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And apparently he has written 5 episodes of Bounty Law, the 60s Western series from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Whether he will actually produce and direct those shows for us to see, probably on some streaming service, remains to be seen, or whether that was just something he did as a side project. But I suspect that the reason this actually got published is how well it actually turned out. Tarantino is a great novelist. Who knew? I'll just quickly go through my relationship with Tarantino as a writer. I actually discovered him more as a writer. I think I'd seen Reservoir Dogs and True Romance back in the early 90s, so this would have been about 93, 94, prior to Pulp Fiction. At the time, Faber and Faber published the screenplay for True Romance, and Total Film gave it away free with a magazine. And I remember my friend Peter Cooper telling me I'd had to get this thing because it was so brilliantly written and it made watching the film an even richer experience. So I bought Total Film just to read the True Romance screenplay, and to my delight, discovering that actually, yes, you can really see what a great writer Tarantino is, especially of dialogue, when you read it off the page. So off the back of reading this screenplay, I became a Tarantino prose junkie. I collected every published screenplay of his up until Jackie Brown. I believe I read the screenplay for Natural Born Killers and Pulp Fiction before seeing the movie. Tarantino says that when he writes a story, he needs to know every element. He needs to know the entire backstory of the characters. He needs to know every detail of the world that this story takes place in. It doesn't always necessarily end up on screen, but he needs to know it's there. What's fantastic about him moving into the novelisation of his screenplays arena is that at last we get to experience the expanded world of his stories, and you see that it was no small claim of his. He does know every element. He knows the entire backstory of these characters, and we get to read about it. We find out in the novel whether Cliff Booth, Brad Pitt's character, really did kill his wife or not. We get to spend more time with the Manson family. There's a great section called Pussycat's Creepy Crawl, all about the character Pussycat breaking into an elderly couple's house just to freak them out. Sadly, what ended up on the cutting room floor seems to be largely the Lancer stuff, the TV pilot that Rick Dalton is shooting. People have described Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the movie, as being a hangout movie. Very little happens because the majority of the runtime is just spent with these two characters and seeing them going about their day-to-day life. But if you read the novel, which I suspect is largely made up of what ended up on the cutting room floor of the movie version, I know Tarantino has said there is a possible 3 hour 20 minute 10-minute version that he could assemble from the cut footage. You can see it's even more so a hangout movie. There are vast long passages of Rick Dalton and his experience of filming this little TV pilot and the trials he has to go to, doing it all with a hangover. So yeah, as a major Tarantino fan, I'm obviously very excited for any new Tarantino project, which is why I ordered my copy the day this came out. Tarantino is a great prose writer. I have heard some critics dismiss this as pulp. Well, yes, Tarantino has made no bones about the fact that his favourite sort of writing is Pulp Fiction. I mean, he made a movie called Pulp Fiction, and obviously he cites Elmore Leonard, probably the ultimate pulp writer, as being a major influence. The novel is entirely written in the present tense, so it feels like one of his screenplays when you read it on the page. Obviously, that's just the tense that he's used to writing in. I'll be intrigued to see if he ever does a past tense novel in the future. I feel that the critics aren't ready to endorse Tarantino as being a great novelist just yet. Well, I'm here to say that on the strength of what I read here, I think he is a great novelist, or indeed he very well could be. If he sticks true to his plan to only make 10 movies, I think he could have a very strong career as a novelist on the strength of this. This is more than pulp storytelling. This is proper prose writing. The novel is an immersive experience. He really puts you into this world. Okay, it's probably aided by the fact that he made the film in the first place. So obviously he isn't just delving into his imagination here. He has seen every scene in this film come to life before his eyes anyway. I'll be intrigued to see if he does quite a good job in the future, if he decides to write something that wasn't based on a pre-existing work of his beforehand. Yeah, this is a great piece of writing. I'd say it's up there with anything that Bret Easton Ellis has done. Okay, at times it does feel more like a film history book of the cinema and pop culture scene of the 1960s more than a novel. But then Easton Ellis's work draws heavily upon the minutiae of pop culture as well. What started as a side project to keep Tarantino amused during the pandemic, I'd say turned out, in the end, to be the great American novel. Who knew he had that in him?